Hey everyone, it's CD here again and welcome back to the channel. So what I have here is Sony's PlayStation Portal, which I've had for the last month or so, and I've been playing around with it, using it to, play games, from my bed, play games off my couch, playing from my desk. I've even taken it with me on trips while traveling to play various games, and essentially it's Sony's $200 answer to being able to play, remote. Now it's not a true console by any means. You still need a PS5 and you need to have like a Wi-Fi connection to be able to play games off of this device. Now, I will say Sony did do a recent update for PlayStation Plus Premium members that allows you to play cloud games without having a PS5, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. I really just want to take some time to kind of talk about the device, kind of share my experience with using it, and just talk about who is this device really aimed for, where it falls short, and where I feel like it has a lot of value. The PlayStation Portal is essentially just a DualSense controller split in half with an 8-inch LCD screen down the middle of it. So nothing super complicated when it comes to this device. It's about the same as what you'd expect out of a normal PS5 controller. It even weighs about the same, so even like after long sessions, it doesn't feel any different, at least to me. It doesn't feel awkward. It feels about the same as like a regular controller. Now, when it comes to like the DualSense experience, it's the exact same as a PS5 controller as well. So in terms like the adaptive triggers, the haptic feedback that you get, it even has the same built-in microphone that you get like in a regular PS5 controller. So you're able to communicate and talk to people while you're gaming. So for the most part, pretty straightforward. As far as the battery life on this device, it also has I believe a 4,000 milliamp hour battery cell. So you're supposed to get around 8 hours, at least that's what Sony claims, out of this device. I never actually used it for more than maybe an hour or two. So I never really maxed it out. But if you do need more juice or you need to charge it, you can just charge it via a USB-C cable and keep playing. So it's pretty simple. The hardware on this device is also pretty straightforward as well. It comes with your power button and then your volume controls. And that's pretty much it. Nothing super complicated. It's a very simple device for the most part. Now, the thing that I did find very weird about this device is that it doesn't have any Bluetooth connectivity at all. So in order to be able to listen to audio off this device, you have to have a wired 3.5 millimeter jack connection through your headphones to be able to listen to any audio through this device, which in 2025 just doesn't make any sense to me. To be able to listen to audio on a remote device, you can't listen to audio wirelessly. So if you have like Bluetooth headphones, like they won't work with this device. I'm fortunate where I happen to have some Ascension headphones that have a 3.5 millimeter jack. But if you're using like AirPods or whatever, you cannot connect those to this device, which I think was an incredible miss by Sony, in my opinion. Like that's something that should have been at least a requirement when they came up, at least when they designed this device, but very unfortunate in my opinion. But overall, I would say the build quality still feels very solid. All the controls feel very premium, just like a regular PS5 controller. And like I said, it's just really the same experience. And so if you've ever used a PS5 controller or have used like a PlayStation controller before, you pretty much know what to expect here. There's nothing, overly complicated with this device. The setup is pretty straightforward. You pretty much just need to pair your PSN account with the device, and then you'll connect it to your PS5 while you're on the same network, and then you're pretty much good to go. Nothing really much more than that. And then once you launch it, it launches your PS5 pretty quickly. I had no issues with being able to launch it. Like you can, even if you're playing like remotely, you can launch it pretty fast and keep going. Now performance, that's where things get really interesting with the PlayStation 5. You have to remember that everything that you see on the Portal is essentially being streamed off your PS5 onto the Portal. So your Wi-Fi connection really matters a lot here. And depending on your Wi-Fi speeds, it'll really dictate your overall experience while playing games on the Portal. And so my recommendation is, if you are able to get faster Wi-Fi speeds, you definitely want to get as fast Wi-Fi as you can get. If you're able to have like, a hardwired Ethernet connection from your PS5 to your router, I definitely recommend that just to get like faster upload speeds. On top of that, the Portal itself does support 2.4 gigahertz as well as 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi connectivity. So if you are able to get the 5 gigahertz, you definitely want to go with that option since it's a little bit more faster, a little bit more stable. But overall, I will say the gaming on this device feels pretty good for the most part. Now you will encounter a little bit of latency depending on the games that you play. I definitely noticed that while I was playing games on the Portal. I tried playing some more faster paced games such as like Battlefield 6 and Arc Raiders, and Those games were okay, but they were pretty much unplayable at times where I just experienced just way too much latency, and I was like, well, I just cannot play these games. And at least for me, while I was playing those games, like it was just the aiming was off. The controls just didn't feel very responsive, and I just could not play at all play those games at all. And I guess it makes sense, if you're playing games, via a stream essentially, outside of your home, you're going to encounter like some type of, some latency, some issues or delay or whatever. But for me, it just made the games very unplayable. I just didn't even want to play those games. Now, when it came to like, slower paced games, I had a much better experience. I did play some games like Assassin's Creed. I played Age of Empires. I even played NCAA football. And those games, I had a much better experience while playing those games via the remote play option. So I definitely recommend, like, depending on, what type of games you like to play, can kind of dictate, like, if you get a lot of value out of playing the Portal. If you're playing a lot of slower paced games, then then the Portal is really just fine. But if you're trying to play, any type of first person shooter, or any type of, fast paced game that has like a lot of inputs and stuff, then I really wouldn't recommend the Portal, or just it won't be a really good experience. Now, with some of the new updates, PlayStation did add a new cloud gaming feature for PlayStation Plus Premium members. Basically, what this means is that you don't have to have remote play as the only option to play games, but you can play games through PlayStation's cloud gaming database, which gives you access to a wide range of various games that you can play. And I will say they perform pretty well, and they play a lot better than a lot of the remote play games. The only downside is that you're kind of limited to what games you're able to play. It's mostly like single player games. You don't really have, you can't play. There's a lot of games that you really can't play. But it is nice to have, because essentially what this means is you don't need a PS5 to play those games. You can just play games via the PlayStation Cloud, and you can play them pretty much anywhere. If you select the PlayStation button, go to troubleshooting and go to network status, it will show your network speeds, latency, game resolution for when you're gaming through the cloud. You can also adjust the game resolution if you feel like you need faster speeds. I will say the 1080p has looked pretty good while playing some of the cloud games. Since gaming off the PlayStation Portal, I feel like the best use cases have really been for casual gaming sessions, whether I'm just gaming from my desk or I'm gaming, in my bed. Those have really been my best experiences while gaming off of this device. If I'm at home, it's really perfect. Say you want to be able to, play games while the TV's occupied, things like that. It's really, the perfect device to kind of have. And anytime you want to game at home, it's really perfect. Now, when it comes to trying to game outside of your home, and that's when things get a lot more inconsistent, where you're really dependent on your Wi-Fi connection. But when it comes to gaming at home, this is really the perfect use case for this device. And then even with the new updates regarding the cloud gaming, you don't need a PS5 to even play some of the games. So you can just, pull out the device and play whatever game that's in that cloud gaming database, which is, a nice thing to have as well. Now, I still think there's a lot of limitations when it comes to the PlayStation Portal. And overall, you still really need a PS5, and you need a good Wi-Fi connection to really be able to use this device. And like a lot of other handhelds that are out there, it's not a standalone handheld. It's not a standalone console to be able to play games. And even with like some of the new cloud updates that Sony made, you're still not able to play games outside of what's already in that cloud database. So there's a bunch of games that you really aren't able to play unless you have like a PS5 or are able to play via remote play. And as I mentioned earlier, remote play is all dependent on your Wi-Fi connection. So, if you have a bad Wi-Fi network, you're gonna have a bad experience while playing, games essentially. That's just gonna be how it is. And on top of that, the screen is nothing special either. It's just a simple 60 hertz LCD screen. It's not even OLED, which a lot of other handhelds that are currently out in the market today, are OLED. This device is just a regular LCD panel. And so when it comes to like having like crisp visuals for gaming, it's not gonna be the same as some other devices that are out there. It's not gonna be the best quality that you would expect. But that's just kind of what it is. And as I mentioned earlier, there's no Bluetooth, which I think was just a major miss on Sony's part. Like, come on, it's 2025. I would expect to have Bluetooth to be able to listen to audio on a remote device. Price-wise, I still think $200 is on the pricier side when you think about what all this device can do. It's still mostly a remote play device, and even with like the new cloud gaming updates that they made, you still have to have that PlayStation Plus Premium membership to even play those games that you would have already had to pay for. I do feel like when you compare the Portal to other handhelds like the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch, it just doesn't really stack quite the same. you know, you can get a Nintendo Switch and a Steam Deck for around $300 to $400, where the Portal itself is $200. But with the Portal, you have to ultimately play, you know, for the Portal itself, plus that premium PlayStation Plus subscription, which adds up. And then, you know, it's not a true handheld. With those other, you know, with the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch, those are true handhelds that you can pretty much take anywhere, you know, and play it as a console, play whatever game that you want to play. You know, the Portal is really dependent on, you know, what your network connectivity is like. Now, I will say if you already are a PS5 user and you're accustomed to using or playing PlayStation 5 games, and you just want to, like, you know, play casually at home, this really is a perfect device. And to be able to have like this, you know, the experience of playing a game in your hands, it's pretty cool. And I've enjoyed it pretty well. I would recommend it for anybody that's used to playing, you know, any PlayStation game. But if you're not already in like the PlayStation ecosystem or used to playing, you know, off of a PlayStation, then you probably might not want this device. You might want to go a different route. But, you know, overall the device is still pretty good, and it does a lot of things well. But there are some alternatives that are out there. Now, I will say, if you're somebody that already has a PlayStation 5 or is accustomed to playing PlayStation games, and you find yourself in a lot of situations where you're not always able to play on your TV, and you have like a reliable network, then it makes sense to, you know, to get this device. You can get a lot of good value out of the PlayStation Portal. On top of that, you know, if you're playing a lot of, like, I would say slower paced games or a lot of, you know, single player games, you know, you can get a lot of value out of this device, and, you know, even, you know, go different places, you know, outside of your home and play games that, you know, might be slower paced. You know, you can get a lot of enjoyment or a lot of good experiences out of playing the PlayStation Portal. But if I was somebody that really wanted a true standalone handheld, then I would probably go with some other options that are currently out there, like, you know, say a Steam Deck or a Nintendo Switch. If I'm playing a lot of like competitive, fast-paced games, I probably get a lot more value out of playing on those devices versus playing on the Portal. I'm gonna keep using it for now. I pretty much already know what works and what doesn't work when it comes to using this device. It really just kind of comes down to what your use case is. You know, you can get a lot of value out of it, or you might not get a lot of value out of it. But I'm gonna keep using it for now. I will be curious though, you know, for those that do have the Portal, you know, what has your experience been like with using the Portal? You know, what's worked for you while using it? But overall, thank you for tuning into the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.